Hello, I'm Sean Thomas, and this is my Sprint 1 report for my capstone project. So for the sprint, uh, just as a general background before I get into the sprint retrospective, the part of the project that I'm working on is a voyage level, which essentially is a mini game inside of the overall larger game that allows the user to navigate a boat through rocks for Paul's mission to Malta, or as he's crashing to Malta, yes. But the main gameplay mechanic is that there's rocks you have to dodge in the boat. If you get hit by them, you take damage to the boat, and if it's completely damaged, the boat breaks and you lose. Anyways, to get started with that, I created the new Voyage class, which implements the core game loop for the Voyage level. So that includes just making the first scene itself, and then adding the boat into that and rocks, um, as well as getting all the update loops and init loops and all that, and creating the terrain. Then I implemented the boat navigation system with left and right controls. So this is what allows the user to move around the rocks. Um, so I got that working fine, and it's bounded within the terrain as well. Then I developed the rock generation slash spawning system, and this is technically complete as the logic is fine, but it is blocked by a bug, so the rocks don't spawn correctly because of the physics in the scene classes. But that's because the spawning for that is broken. So if that was fixed, the rock would generate and spawn correctly. Um, and then I also set the camera tracking system that follows the boat's movement. And then some blockers, like I mentioned, the physics engine bugs are preventing rock from moving, um, behaving the way it should. So when the boat would hit a rock, it might move the rock in the wrong direction, or it might not even detect a collision at all, and the boat would just go through the rock. So that's an issue that needs to be fixed. And then the bounding box collision detection, again, would just produce inaccurate hit detection. And then in the scene class, I believe the boundaries of the scene are calculated incorrectly based on the scale of the rock. And I guess the scale doesn't account for the position, something along those lines that I need to look into more. So here's my sprint burn down chart. It's slightly inaccurate as I had to build this today instead of tracking over Jira over time. So I will use Jira next time to make sure it's all accurate. But some of the main tasks I completed, scene architecture setup, which I estimate to be 3 story points, and that was just getting the first Voyage scene class setup, like I mentioned. And then obtaining the assets I estimated before, because previously looking for assets that fit the project and the engine correctly was took a while. So I estimated that to be one of the more larger tasks. And then boat navigation, I assumed to be easy, only 1 point. It wasn't too difficult, so I was correct in my estimation. And then the rock obstacle generation, it was estimated to be 3 story points. And then the camera perspective update was also 2 points. And then so here's my sprint 1 burn down chart. So breakdown of labor, scene architecture and setup was only 5%. It was relatively quick. I already had a main file, so I just pretty much copied that and modified it, modified the texture of the terrain, added in my boat that I got for my asset task, and then just built into that, and then modified some stuff in the loops and init file or init functions. Gameplay mechanics took about 20% of my time, which is including the setting up the boat to be able to move left and right in a certain confined space, and then also adding the rocks in to be generated near the boat so that the user can dodge them, as well as optimizing the object. And then object generation was 5% of my time. Um, this was simply just for the rocks, essentially. So initially, I had like a huge array full of rocks that would just continuously be added to over time, and this pretty much made it impossible to play the game performance-wise. So I had to optimize that and then use a deck instead of an array. So I could delete rocks from the front so that the rocks that were behind the boat wouldn't be um, stored or rendered anymore. And then looking for valid assets took a lot of my time as well. Looking for like the boat object and then the water asset and the rock object file and then the rock and boat textures took a while. Because they had to fit the engine, and then they also had to also look nice. And then, so this wasn't really covered in any of my tasks because it wasn't technically completed. but debugging the external engine files took a lot of my time, trying to figure out why things weren't working and trying to make the rocks move correctly. So that wasn't finished, but that's probably gonna be the priority of my next sprint. So the new features I'm gonna demo, the voyage level based scenery and class implementation, the ocean terrain and texture, and the boat's left and right controls, and then rock obstacle generation, and then camera perspective fixed behind the boat. So now I'm gonna go ahead and run my game. So you can see the rocks are being generated, but they're being constrained by some sort of border issue that's from the scene class. And then if I hit my left and right keys, as you can see, the boat's moving left and right, and the camera follows it within third person. So I believe that's all the features I wanted to demo. Yeah. So what's for next sprint? The physics system bugs are going to be an issue that I need to fix. So I'm probably going to focus on this physics to make sure that object collision detection can happen, and then debug the object scaling issue that's causing inconsistencies to allow objects to be rendered inside the borders. And then the scene system bugs, debug different objects that are having different boundary rules. Again, I believe that's from the scaling, but I'll have to look into that. And now I'm going to go through some of my code. So here's just the basic scene code that I had from my main function. And then, so this is the uh, global game object, not global, but class boat object, which is allows for the object to be moved left and right inside of the update function right here. Um, this rocks deck allows the rocks to be added and then deleted from more efficiently than using an array. So rocks will not all be rendered when they're not seen anymore and they're not needed. And then this rock distance counter is going to be, when I get the physics working, it's going to be able to be modified to allow the rocks to be rendered a certain amount of distance away from the boat. So these are assigned to React. This is all just the same, pretty much boilerplate for the scene game objects. This is our voyage scene. Um, so it has the basic Blender terrain and the ocean texture as the floor. These are just basic boundaries. Here's our boat object. This is the Charmy object, which is the type of boat that it is, and then the boat wood texture. And this is how it's added to the game. And the boat is set to that boat thing. So it can be accessed inside of the update function. And then the boundary blocks and all that, I don't know if that's completely working right now, so it needs to be fixed in the physics update. And then here's where I was just experimenting with some rock stuff, and this is where the currency is created. Um, so this is the run function for when the project's run. It just creates update function, initializes all the basic things, and then renders it, and then allows the user to go full screen or exit. And then here in the update function, so this code right here is what causes the boat and camera to consistently move. And then right here is how the boat and camera moves left and right. And then, so here's the logic that I had to generate rocks, as you can see here. And again, this is where the rock displacement is. And then how many rocks should be in the queue or the deck at all time. And then this code right here determines how many rocks should be generated every so often. This is based on this, which gets updated every single time, so that the screen is filled with rocks. And then once again, an object is created is destroyed every single time a new one is supposed to be added. And here's how the rock is added. And basically, it's supposed to randomly generate the rock X, I believe, right here. So on the x-axis is random, but then it's supposed to always be a certain amount of distance in front of the boat, which is why I believe it should be correct. and I think the spawning in functionality somewhere is broken, as I have tested this out, and it does seem to update correctly. And then it just gets added to the rocks deck as well. And then this is just the basic stuff for our scene functionality to update and create the scene and all that. Um, and that's all the main functionality I've created for this sprint that I wanted to go over.